We have decided to set ourselves a great challenge to explore themes such as doctrines, axioms, postulates, and principles, and their manifestation and influence on our practical life. So when we set out to study our conceptual framework and understand on what basis we have developed our spiritual path, we ask ourselves the following question. In the face of so much human pain, why study our doctrine? In a nutshell, what is it really good for? The study of belief systems and spiritual practices has revealed how certain fundamental conceptual elements, such as doctrines, axioms, postulates, and principles, tend to structure theoretical thinking and the practical lives of those who adopt them.
What threads does a doctrine weave, and what is it for? The doctrine constitutes an articulated and coherent system of teachings that frames a comprehensive view of the world and provides guidelines for human conduct. It is like a loom that creates an intertwined and harmonious elements, resulting in a specific fabric. In a spiritual context, doctrines represent sets of knowledge that integrate explanations about the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, and the method for achieving certain states or goals, which can be scientific, social, political, environmental, educational, or spiritual. This is the nature and function of a doctrine. From the moment we are born, we receive from those around us ways of relating and habits that reflect a way of understanding life and relationships that implies living what we understand.
For example, at one point, when I had the task of receiving new children at school, it was up to me to talk to the parents, and the first thing they wanted to know was the philosophy of education that we practiced. That is, in other words, the doctrine. I explained to them that our school followed the program the state gave, was non-denominational, and that all beliefs were respected. Therefore, the values we showed to the children were universal: respect, inclusion, honesty, and we valued effort and responsibility. Why do some parents have this concern? Because doctrine is a way of understanding life and generates very different behaviors and decisions depending on how it is presented. In the spiritual context, axioms function as fundamental truths within the system and as a starting point for understanding more complex teachings. In this sense, it is like the cornerstone. It gives a direction for how something should be built. And they are also like the central stone of an arch. They are what holds up and supports the doctrine. Another example would be the warp thread of a loom that holds and gives firmness to other threads we weave.
Postulates, closely related to axioms, are fundamental propositions assumed as the basis for developing a system of thought. They are like the pillars that support the temple. In the spiritual realm, postulates establish fundamental truths that are not necessarily self-evident, but accepted as the foundation for constructing a worldview. In spiritual traditions, these postulates often manifest as statements about the ultimate nature of reality, the human being, or divinity. For example, Epicureans and Stoics in Greek philosophy represent two distinct but equally profound approaches to living a whole and meaningful life. The Epicureans seek tranquility through moderate pleasure and avoiding pain, while the Stoics find happiness in virtue and accepting their fate. In practice, these philosophies generate different ways of living. The Epicureans promote simplicity and meaningful relationships, while the Stoics value discipline, self-control, and social responsibility. Both schools continue to influence contemporary thought and offer valuable teachings for personal fulfillment and flourishing.
Principles represent fundamental norms or ideas that govern thought and behavior. Unlike axioms, which operate mainly at the theoretical and conceptual levels, principles have a more explicit practical dimension, guiding action and decision-making. In spiritual traditions, principles are often derived from axioms and postulates, translating them into guidelines applicable to everyday life. They function as moral and existential compasses that allow those who practice them to navigate the complexities of the human experience with coherence and purpose.
A practical example is observed in persons who practice Buddhist doctrine. Understanding the second noble truths, that means the cause of suffering is the desire, they can identify and modify dysfunctional attachment patterns. By internalizing the understanding that attachment to objects, which is manifestations of desire, inevitably leads to suffering when they are damaged or lost. Many people develop an attitude of use without possessiveness. This does not necessarily imply giving up material comforts, but rather relating to them from a more free and less identified perspective, significantly reducing the anxiety associated with the possibility of loss and allowing you to enjoy objects without them becoming source of constant worry.
Analysis of these spiritual systems reveals how doctrine, axioms, postulates, and principles are not merely theoretical abstractions, but structural elements that shape human experience in its most fundamental dimensions. They allow human beings to understand their experience and orient their lives toward goals that are considered valuable within their respective belief systems. The power of doctrine lies in its explanatory capacity and potential to profoundly reorganize the human experience. It can transform what people think about reality and how they experience and live it. Hence, knowing our fundamental ideas and teaching them to guide souls into their purpose of inner liberation is essential. We have in Cafh as the basis of our understanding of our doctrine the concept of renouncement. It is not an easy idea to explain, but our founder, Don Santiago, stated that we must not delay showing the practice of renunciation to the souls that enter Cafh. Otherwise, it would be deceiving them.
A final question. When discussing doctrine, how do we avoid dogmatism and indoctrination that limit and generate so much pain in the world? We are not referring to spurious and malicious doctrines. Instead, we are referring to those ideas that arose for the good of humanity and originated from extraordinary beings. Doctrines that proclaim love have been used to impose, dominate, persecute, and engender wars and destruction. These types of doctrines that harm humanity are usually those based on deception, false promises, intolerance, and limitations on thought and freedom, while those that contribute to human evolution are those that promote peace, love, justice, respect, and the integral development of human being in all its dimensions. But let us not fool ourselves. We can see people moved by dogmatism, which blinds and creates confrontations, referred to at the same time as a doctrine. On the other hand, we see mystics moved by divine love and service to all beings, pouring great spiritual strength and inner freedom over humanity. So we ask ourselves, what does it depend on?
It depends on us, human beings. How do we understand a doctrine? How do we teach it and apply it? Are we able to practice and internalize its principles in such a way as to foster a degree of coherence between what we live and what we proclaim? How strong is the cloth that results from what we weave with the fabric of our life? When we unite our will with the knowledge to live according to our growing understanding of ourselves and the world, we move toward union with the divine. And with this attitude and approach, we can provide solutions to the world's problems. To make the ideas that sustain our spiritual path a source of good for humanity, Cafh gives us content and teachings to study, taking special care of their character and the way of transmitting them. We will talk about this in an upcoming meeting.